Good afternoon, children of class 12th. Today we again will start with this bio lesson of chapter 1, Reproduction in Organisms, children. And children, we see that in video 4 last time we studied about the puberty, sexual reproductive ways in higher plants and events in sexual reproduction like pre-fertilization, fertilization and post-fertilization events. In the last video, we had seen the pre-fertilization events and characteristics of plants and the animals connected with the pre-fertilization events. Today, we look at the second aspect of the sexual reproduction, which is fertilization. Now, what is fertilization, children? Fertilization or syngamy. This involves most vital event of sexual reproduction, fusion of gametes, children. Male and female gametes, they unite together, leading to formation of diploid cell or zygote. This entire event is fertilization. Syngamy is the union of two gametes. If syngamy does not occur, then organisms like rotifers, honeybees, lizards, birds and turkeys, they do not show syngamy if it does not occur. But we see a female gamete undergoes development to form new individual or new organism without fertilization. Now this is parthenogenesis. What is parthenogenesis, children? The phenomenon by which a new organism formation takes place where egg develops without entrance of a sperm. And we see that there is a difference between external and internal fertilization in the plants and animals. The first difference that we see here is in majority of algae, bony fishes and amphibians, syngamy occurs outside the body of the organism through water medium, whereas in internal fertilization, children, we see that in majority of plants such as bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms and higher animals, we see that also in cartilaginous fishes, reptiles, birds and mammals, the gamete fusion takes place inside the body of organism. Then let us see the second difference. The second difference is thus fertilization outside the body of organism is called external fertilization. Then we see in internal fertilization, fertilization takes place inside the body of an organism, and this is known as internal fertilization. Likewise, we see children, organisms exhibiting external fertilization. There are organisms that exhibit external fertilization. They show great synchrony between the sexes and release large number of gametes in water for chances of gametic fusion. Likewise, in internal fertilization, children, we see in organisms that egg is formed inside the female's body where they can fuse with male gamete. The male gamete is motile, that means it can move and it has to reach the egg in order to fuse with the egg. Then we see Another difference between external and internal fertilization. In external fertilization, one of the main disadvantages of external fertilization is that the offsprings are extremely vulnerable to predators, threatening their survival. Whereas in internal fertilization, we see the number of male gametes is very large in comparison to the eggs that are formed. In seed plants, however, the non-motile and male gametes are carried to the female gametes via pollen tubes. And because in animals, the embryo is developed inside the female's body, that is why the survival of the embryo is much more safe than what happens in external fertilization. Then children, let us see some post-fertilization events. A diploid zygote is formed as a result of fertilization. We see that a diploid zygote is formed as a result of fertilization. In organisms with external fertilization, we see children that zygote is formed in the internal medium, in the external medium, whereas in those exhibiting internal fertilization, zygote is formed inside the body of the organism. And we see zygote forms a link between individuals of one generation to the next. Likewise, we see what is embryogenesis. Embryogenesis is the process of development of embryo from zygote. This process is known as embryogenesis. The zygote undergoes cell division by mitosis, which increases the number of cells in embryo. The cell differentiation helps groups of cells to undergo modifications, forming specialized tissues and specialized organs, and thus forming the organism. In flowering plants also, let us see that the ovary develops into fruit, and ovules, they mature to seeds. And what is an embryo? We see inside the seed is the progenitor of the next generation. Embryo is the progenitor of the next generation, which carries all the information, and thus it develops into a full plant. Then we see what happens in animals in embryogenesis. In animals, zygote develops soon after formation, and it undergoes series of mitotic cell divisions called cleavage to form pro-embryo like the morula or the blastula. These are formed when the division takes place, and the mitotic cell divisions they continue to take place. Then we see another thing, that animals are either oviparous or viviparous. That means either they are egg laying, and the embryo develops outside the body, or viviparous, wherein they allow the embryo to develop inside the female's body or the female's womb, and then once the embryo is fully developed, then it is given out of the body of the female. So we see embryonal protection and care are better in viviparous organisms. They are safe inside the mother's body. So chances of survival of other young ones is greater in the protection of viviparous organisms. Then we see zygotic meiosis. What is zygotic meiosis? In some algae children and some fungi, the zygote divides by meiosis, resulting in formation of 4 haploid myospores, and this is zygotic meiosis. Sexuality in plants. When both male and female reproductive structures are in same plant, children, then it's called bisexual plant. Whereas when both male and female reproductive structures are on different plants, then it is known as unisexual plant. Then children, we see what is staminate plant and what is pistillate plant. As the name suggests, the unisexual male flower, is called the staminate flower, whereas we see the unisexual female plant is called the pistillate flower. The unisexual female flower is called the pistillate flower. Then we see when both male and female flowers are present on the same individual, the condition is monoecious. When male and female flowers are on different individuals, then their condition is called dioecious. For example, let's see one by one. In cucurbits and coconuts, these are monoecious plants because in this both male and female flowers are present on the same individual. Whereas in papaya and date palm, these are dioecious plants because the male and female flowers are on different individuals. Then let us see some important aspects about the sexuality in animals, children. We see in sexuality in animals that juvenile phase is followed by morphological and physiological changes before active reproductive behavior is reached. So a maturity level of animals has to be reached. The juvenile phase is followed by the maturing phase. Then we see in higher animals, sperms and ova are produced in specialized sex organs. Which are these? These sex organs are known as gonads. The male gonad is the testes, children, if you remember. And this is producing sperms. The testes produces sperms, which are the male gametes. Whereas we see that the female gonads are ovaries, and the ovaries, they produce ova, or the female gamete. Coming to cockroaches, let us see here in this figure, wherein we see both the male and the female reproductive organs in cockroach. We see here that in cockroaches the sexes are separate, and that is the individuals are unisexual. They are producing either testes in case of males or ovaries in case of females. So we see also example in earthworms, children. The tapeworm or the leech, they are same individuals as earthworm, and they carry both the testes and ovaries. That's why the earthworms, they are known as bisexual or hermaphrodite, because they carry the testes and the ovaries both in the same animal. Then we see there are oviparous animals, as I talked about earlier, that in animals like reptiles, birds, the fertilized eggs are covered by calcareous shells laid outside where there is period of incubation. Young ones, they hatch out. Then in viviparous animals, we see the majority of the mammals come. The zygote develops into a young one inside the body of the female or the mother, and they give rise to young ones which are sent outside the body of the female. Then we see what is parthenogenesis. This was discovered in animals by Charles Bonnet in 1745. In insects, honeybee, or crustaceans, etc., we see children that in honeybee the male drones, let me show you in the diagram. In honeybee, children, if you watch in this diagram, the male drones are produced. Do you see here the male drones? The male drones are produced parthenogenetically, whereas the queen bee and the worker bees, here's the queen bee and the worker bee, these develop from the fertilized ova. Then we see also difference between oviparous and viviparous animals. What is the difference, children? In oviparous animals, the females lay fertilized or the unfertilized egg. Then in viviparous animals, we see females give birth to the young ones straight away. In oviparous animals, children, development of zygote takes place outside the female's body, whereas in viviparous animals, the development of zygote takes place inside the female's body. Then we see in oviparous animals, children, chances of survival are less, whereas in viviparous animals, the chances of survival of the embryos are more. In oviparous animals, we see the examples are all birds, most reptiles, and egg-laying mammals, whereas in viviparous animals, we see the examples are mammals except egg-laying mammals. Then children, let us also see the oestrus versus the menstrual cycle. What is the oestrus cycle and what is the menstrual cycle? We see that in oestrus cycle, which means heat cycle, this happens mostly in animals like cows, sheep, rats, deer, dogs, tiger, cats. And here we see that the female receives the male only during a certain period of year. And this period of the year is known as the breeding season. And this is the oestrus cycle, when the female is on heat only during a certain period of the year. Whereas in menstrual cycle, we see the difference. This happens in monkeys or in apes or in humans. Now here we see that the females have menstrual cycle which is repeated at average intervals. As in humans, we see every 28 to 29 days, one menstrual cycle is completed and another begins. So children, with this we conclude this video, and this finishes your first chapter of reproduction in organisms. And from here on we will go on to the second chapter, children, which is sexual reproduction in flowering plants. So children, wish you all the best. Have a good day. Thank you.